Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneur's Playbook, where we help 7- and 8-figure business owners ignite their financial superpowers. Ron, how are you doing today?
Wonderful, Josh. Another episode here at the Entrepreneur's Playbook, and excited to jump in. Always good topics, man. We got a lot going on in the firm. A lot of clients. The economy is starting to show some of its. I don't want to say slowing down, but starting to show some things in the corners. And I would say still the majority of our clients are doing extremely well, but starting to see just definitely on the edges some effects from the economy. But what do we got in store for today, Josh? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so I think we've gotten some feedback that people really like when we just talk about general entrepreneurship topics, right? Throw in those tax and accounting topics here and there, but also just talk about general entrepreneurship. And what I was thinking to talk about today is something I've always struggled with every new business I start, and that is pricing your services or your products when you first get started. And I think it's something where you feel like when you first start, you have to compete on price, right? And I think there is some truth to that, because people don't know you. They don't know how effective you are. So you have to get your foot in the door a lot of times by cutting under other service providers or products, right? At least that's how I felt when I got started. So then the question is, number one, how low do you go? What makes sense? When do you start to up those a little bit? And just how do you go about pricing in general? So I don't know. What do you think? Can you talk about that today?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think it's a super interesting topic because I have my own thoughts about it's tough to compete on price. I'm a big value guy, value transfer and trying to put a price on that. But from an accountant's perspective, let's just start there. Maybe from my perspective, and I'd be interested to hear yours in a general sense, but from an accountant's perspective, you got to reverse engineer. You got to make sure that your price is sustainable for the business and has a profit element. And I'm not saying you got to be at a 50 or an 80% profitability, but I think new entrepreneurs think I can do this for free until I get a big enough footprint that I can raise my price. And what they find is that they run themselves right into the ground very quickly. So from an accountant's perspective, you got to come up with a profitability number. What you do is, okay, where's your first step? Where do a number of units that you want to sell? Say that's 1,000 units, right? What's the cost all in, right? What's your ad budget? Maybe you start off with some contractors, your software, insurances, all your regulatory expenses, right? And then you got to bake in some kind of profitability to be able to invest in your growth. So that's where I start. I'll toss the volleyball back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely the rational way to do it. But I do think it's when you're first getting started, it's hard to have that rational view. And I think I'll flash back to, 12, 13 years ago when I first started CPA on Fire. And even as a CPA and an accountant, or I should know that stuff, it still was like, okay, yeah, I need to be here, but how am I going to get people in at that price? And I'll give you a number that probably blow your mind a little bit. You're going to shake your head when I tell you these prices, but I still remember it. And also keep in mind, it's 12, 13 years ago, so prices have gone way up. But I started a package for my tax services. I was brand new on my own, 30-year-old CPA trying to start a business, right? Trying to lure people into using me. And I said, okay, I'm going to start this package. I'm going to form your entity for you or change your entity if needed. I'm going to do your year-end tax return. I'm going to let you have a 30-minute call with me every month. And that package cost $9.95, which it's laughable, right?
No, it's like,
yep, $1,000, which, I mean, most people can't even get a single tax return prepared for that price right now, let alone all the other stuff. So it was laughable even in 2012 prices. It's certainly laughable in 2024 prices. But I got people in the door and I got some business. And I quickly realized that was not sustainable. I was going to either burn myself into the ground or start having to hire people and lose money on it.
But it did work for me to get some people in the door. And a year later, I doubled it to
2,000. And I think a year after that, we went to 2,500. So it did up quickly. But yeah, that was the dilemma I had of how do yes, I want to show that I can provide value. But before I can show I provide value, I have to actually provide value, right? Is that kind of like a chicken and the egg?
Yeah. No doubt.
You can do it first, or do you get people in another way first? So it's tough. I think it's really tough for a lot of entrepreneurs to figure when you're first starting, what does that look like?
But don't you think that had a lot to do with your client avatar?
For sure.
And the fact that you started with side hustlers, relatively new entrepreneurs, where I think the product that we provide I always talk about entrepreneurs with a little dust on them, they've getting knocked down a few times and gotten up, so they appreciate really. And two is that somebody who's really got growth goals in mind. So like they appreciate getting all that information, all that regulatory, all that stuff off their plate. And then we've built everything around that, around being that team, being the team member, providing a lot of extra value to watch these guys grow and these entrepreneurs grow. So it's just like a different, we have a different client avatar than you did back in the day. So I think for an entrepreneur, you got to figure out who, I think number one, right, your product and service. Number two is who you're selling it to, who's your ideal client. And, I don't think that's a bad strategy in the fact that you were going after a beginner entrepreneur who has growth goals, and maybe you could put a lot of them in the boat and then watch a few of them really take off and be able to develop bigger relationships with them. That's a strategy. So, especially when you had no business, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that bottom line, you got to start bringing revenue in the door by any means necessary when you're first starting. And that is absolutely true. I specifically remember we wrote out that we targeted businesses doing 150,000 or less in gross sales.
Yeah.
So it was completely different avatar, not even comparable to what CT Empire currently does. I still think the prices were extremely low and not sustainable even at that level. And that's another thing. I thought that was my ideal avatar, right? And it was at the time. I discovered those clients, they're fun to work with and everything, but there's almost, in some ways, more work than with an established business.
Yeah, there's an education.
Right, they're needy, for lack of a better word, because they don't know stuff yet. And you have to walk them through even the most basic things, which is fine, but when you're not pricing that in, it quickly becomes unsustainable.
I think it's important too to get away from maybe the CPA services. Like a lot of our entrepreneurs, right, do some kind of scalable product. Some of it's growth, but most of it's scalable. And what is watch some of the most successful, like just say coaches, and some of the most successful coaches. And if you look at their history, maybe their first product, like I said, was $9.99, and now their product is maybe $10,000. They're now doing a mastermind for 25 or $50K a year. It's hard for you to go out and sell a $50,000 coaching product if you're just new on the scene. But so I think there's an opportunity, or there's a necessity to scale up your price. But man, I just think you can't go too low. That's the important piece.
Yeah, there's some trial and error to it. Some of it's going to be, you're going to have to throw out prices, and if too many people are accepting it, you're probably too low. If you're hearing crickets and no one's coming, then you got to adjust the other way, right? There's got to be some trial and error in there. But I agree. You can't go out there offering it for $100 when the competition's offering it for 10,000.
I'll give you another. I'm giving you the entrepreneurial view, and I'm taking the accountant's view. Yeah. I'm going to give you another one. If you take 10%, if you give your client a 10% discount on your price, it's actually a 30% hit to your bottom line. So if you, that's if you have 30% profit margin, right? So it's only 10%, but 10% equates to a 30% reduction in your profit. So something just to think about as you tool around with your pricing. Giving discounts hurts, but that's from the accountant standpoint.
Yeah. And I think in some ways it's become even harder to do this because, okay, if I'd opened an accounting firm 30 years ago, I'd be strictly competing against accountants in my immediate surrounding area, right? So I can look at them and say, okay, they're charging $2,000. Maybe I come in a little less at $1,800. But now I'm competing with accountants all over the US or the world, right? Because you can do this from anywhere. And I was setting it up from my basements with no cost except my $800 tax software, right? So the internet certainly changed the game and in some ways made this easier where you can market to anybody, but also made it more difficult to figure out things like pricing. So I think hearing your explanations from an accountant's view is absolutely, you've got to start with that. You've got to start with, can I actually make money if I'm doing this? And if you're going to go under and you're going to try the low route, as long as you have a plan in place, I think you can at least try it. Say, okay, I'm going to try coming low. I know this is not sustainable, but I'm going to get my first 5 clients in the door, and then I'm going to use that to start jumping up. And then maybe that's something you look at. But no, I do completely agree with you. There is a too low that you can go here where your business is never going to take off if you try to go this route.
Yeah. We have entrepreneurs that they'll do like a first test run. And the whole purpose is to, 1, test out their product or service. And then 2 is to use those as like case studies or get reviews and testimonials for the product and what they've been able to do with the product. So I think if you're strategic about it, I'm all for starting off low, getting people in the door, using them to launch a bigger platform. But again, it's got to be strategic.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example from my work. It even made sense to do it for free. I did 𝙑𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙀 and Entrepreneurs on Fire. When I first started, did their accounting free for 10 years, whatever it was. And it made the business take off. He started featuring me. He liked what I did. He started featuring me on the podcast, and boom, the business exploded. So I think you got to be very careful with that. You can get yourself in trouble. There was a few other times I said, that worked. Let me go try it with this guy. And it did not work. Right? But I think if you can form a strategic alliance like that, and they do offer it for free for a time or permanently, whatever makes sense, that can explode your business if it works out.
Yeah. I think too, you got to be careful about starting low, because I think it's hard to raise your price out in the market.
Yep. So the clients that you do bring on, you're not going to double them the next year. You're going to get in trouble if you start going that route.
Yeah. I'm just thinking course sales, coaching products, apps. What else do? We don't really do too many physical products, but most of our realms in the service-based internet. And yeah, it is an art form.
People can certainly have that perception of, why is this so low? They must not be that.
Yeah, exactly. That is that sometimes the higher the price, the more successful you're going to be, because if someone pays a higher price, they're probably going to follow through more. We just had a situation where I attended a conference, and the conference was free, and they said they had monster cancellations at the last minute. We had a huge banquet at a hotel, and it was only half full. So what happened was, if people don't have skin in the game, they don't show up. Even if that person probably charged a little money, they'd probably have a lot of more higher attendance rate. So there is that. There's like pricing it, like you said, a little too low, and then you don't have adherence, and then you fail, right? Then your product or service fails. Just think, if it's a fitness or a business coach, if you're only paying $200 a month for that coach, you're probably going to be more apt to cancel it than if you're paying $5,000 or something along those lines. And you're more apt to, hey, I'm paying this sizable amount of money, I'm going to take this seriously. There is, what would be the word I'm looking for? Adherence factor with the price. So self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe.
Yep. And I think moving forward, the stickier you can make your business for your clients, that's when you can start to increase prices faster. Like CPA services, for instance, it is a largely sticky business, right? People don't want to be switching back and forth. So if you can show them that value, I think that's the way that you can keep your prices reasonably competitive.
Yeah.
If people don't want to switch, doesn't mean you can overcharge them. People never want to be overcharged. Nothing sticky. So sticky, you can make your business. I'll tell you something else that early on, and I didn't do this on purpose. This wasn't like some smart move. But I think when I was getting started, CPAs, and to a lot of extent still aren't, but they were not doing package prices, right? Not doing flat rate fees, all hourly billing. And when I came in and said, all right, you're going to get all this for $1,000, people were interested in that because they didn't like the unexpected charges that came with CPA price. So I think if you can make yourself stand out from the competition, even if it's not a pure price, just doing something different with your pricing, whether it's making a package that other people aren't, or something, that's a way you can compete as well, instead of just on pure doing lower than everybody else.
Yeah. Or you have a trial run, and then you have get somebody familiar with your services and your value. Let me just say this, we can conclude on this, but you mentioned about the tax services. We always talk about anybody with a high school degree can become a tax preparer. There is a variable with the level of service that you're going to get, because it's just a wide range of people who come into the profession. Yeah, I guess no different than a lawyer, right? And just because somebody went to a fancy school doesn't necessarily mean they're a good lawyer and they're going to help you. So it's all relative as far as your due diligence, when you actually do, making sure when you put that price out there, you support that price with social proof and professional looking presentations and things like that.
Yep. I'll end it here. My favorite part of pricing, when you get to this point, is what every successful entrepreneur gets to this point, where you're finally saying, all right, I can't take on any more business, so I'm going to just keep upping my prices to turn people away. And suddenly people keep accepting those prices no matter how much you keep upping them. And that is the fun place to be. And you start kicking yourself saying, God, how much could I have been doing this for the last 5 years?
Yeah, you realize how much money you left on the table.
Right. And I think every successful entrepreneur, pretty much every client we've worked with, they eventually get to that point where I can't take on any more clients. I'm just going to make my prices crazy, and people just keep still accepting it.
Yeah, it goes back to people think that they're getting value. And two is you've become better at delivering that value. So maybe That's a piece of it too, right? It's like we're like really in tune with the space that we service, right? We're giving a lot more value than just doing bookkeeping or doing somebody's taxes. Like insane amount of like industry knowledge that we go and we give advice on, and really listen to the entrepreneur and her goals or his goals and building a plan for that. That's stuff that you need that industry knowledge to know how to do. So
yeah, and I think that's the bottom line with all this. No price point is sustainable. No business is sustainable without the value to back that what you're charging.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
work on that first.
Always a pleasure being with you, Josh. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch up like Josh said next week and go out there and crush it. Thanks, guys.